Hi, I'm Richard Bamforth, one of the two fishery management advisors employed by the Angling Trust. Broadly speaking, I cover the north of the country with my counterpart Jake Devoyle covering the south. Our roles are funded from fishing licence income and form part of the overall Angling Trust contract with the Environment Agency. After a somewhat hectic past few months and following a number of complaints or concerns being raised by angling clubs, etc., of otters within fenced fisheries, we thought it may be worth highlighting some of the often obvious entry and egress points, but also some of the extreme cases that some otters will go to access a venue. I've got to stress, I'm not wishing to teach anyone out there how to suck eggs, as the saying goes, and undoubtedly a lot of this will be second nature to a vast number of existing fence sites. Neither is this a reflection of any of the sites, some of which people may recognise from some of the videos. What I would just like to say is a massive thank you to some of those venues for being so patient at times. And please be mindful, some of these that we are about to see are extreme and they're not necessarily the norm. Next slide, please, Alex.
So basically, I'm going to go through some of the common entry points. We'll just be looking at gates, whether it's under the fence, whether it's through the fence, how they got through, saturated ground, is it inflows, outflows, are they climbing? And this is by no means a comprehensive list, it's just some of the main areas that we want to go and look at. And I cannot emphasize the next point enough, and I don't like saying it all the time, but I cannot emphasize enough to people the necessity to regularly and rigorously check and maintain your fence lines. Now that's easy for me, sat here on a chair. I do appreciate that time and effort for those sites in some extreme topography at times, but seriously, they have got to be checked. Next slide, please, Alex. So again, probably a repeat slide from the previous show, but gates, more often than not, Jake and I will receive a phone call from fisheries or other sites, and they assume that the otters must have got in through a gate that's been left open or ajar, not shut properly, whatever. People do a quick wander around the site, and that's the first conclusion they jump to. It must be the gate. But more often than not, and what we have found out is that when you're actually there and looking around, the otters have actually probably been coming and going over a period of time and just literally going unnoticed. So even if the gate is shut, you cannot leave anything else to chance. So here you can clearly see there's broken strands on the bottom, there's splayed wires, and that's a gap down there of 20 centimeters. So hopefully that's pretty obvious. Next slide. Even when we get down to gaps, 3 inches under a gate, it's too much. That gap needs to be down to no more than 2 inches. More than 2 inches, and you're looking at something potentially sliding underneath. At times try and forget about, people always going on about the big dog otters, think about the smaller, maybe the smaller females or the sub-adults that are going under there. Next slide, please, Alex. So here, as you can see, again, it is a repeat. I've shown this before on the last one, and it showed 2 rabbits coming and going, and then it shows that otter there. That, I kid you not, is one of 3 otters, and on one night we got 3 otters coming in, and then a few hours later 3 otters going out by that same avenue. And it wasn't until I provided that video footage that the landowner in question would believe how they were coming and going. I've got videos of him looking at that fence and shaking his head, not believing that anything could go under there, but unfortunately, well, they were. Next slide, please, Alex. Alternatively, it may be that just slipping under your fence. I accept this is a chicken wire, rabbit, hexagonal netting, but it could be one of the more bespoke otter fences. If that fence is lifted, then again, otters will be coming and going. That has got skirts on it, ordinarily that fence, but there's just a little area that's got lifted by whatever means, and that otter and other otters were coming and going. Next slide, please. Or it may be a case that we've had some very well-intentioned maintenance works going on around your fence site that's actually resulted in, unfortunately, Wires have been cut, as on the image on the left. Again, the wires there, all three cut, but then I have other photographs and evidence of otters then using that avenue to come and go through the fence. It could be a case of the image on the right-hand side. You can see to the bottom, the wires are splayed. There is signs of something or other going through there, a bit of grass trampled down, and otters or something or other is following that line. Similarly, you might get that area there. You can see it's been in a pool of water, it's been in standing water, waterlogged. So often you'll get that the netting's rotted away. And we'll see that on a few sites at the interface of ground level, it's just rotted away, and something, otters or otherwise, are coming and going under there. Of late, we are seeing more and more fences that have got damaged through strimmers, whether it's cut by like the one on the left, or a lot of the time the wires have simply got splayed. Somebody just inadvertently clipped the netting, and they've splayed the wires. They're tired, they haven't realised, they're not noticing it, and before you know it, there's an opening and something starts to use that opening in and out. Next slide, please. So this video, hopefully just trying to emphasize, you know, what an otter can actually go through. So this is on an outlet stream. And that there, ladies and gents, is standard, let's say, otter fence, 100 by 50, 4-inch by 2-inch. And if we go to the next slide, Alex, there in the circle, that is actually all it took. Just those wires, just to get splayed that little bit, and that's all it is. And when that netting, I assure you, those knots were not slipping anymore. It wasn't splaying any further. And that's all it was taking for that, and I believe another one to be coming and going through that vantage point. Next slide, please, Alex. And if we can play this. We'll often get signs where otters themselves are actually scrabbling and digging at a fence line. But if you imagine if that was an otter fence and you've got a badger going at your fence and either trying to dig under the gate as it is there, going at the side of the otter fence and digging and scrabbling at your netting, can it dig under? Can it splay the wires? Who knows? It does carry on, does this video, so just stay with it if we can. Although it does appear to have frozen at my side. So maybe so again, it's back to the gate. Again, just imagine this either being an otter or in this case a badger, and trying to dig under somewhere, trying to splay your wires. 2 hours later, and it is. But again, 3 months. And if people tell me on their trail cameras once they've been fenced, they've still got otters going several months afterwards, back to that fence, still going around the fishery night after night, or once a week, twice a week, whatever it may be, just trying to find a weakness in the fence, trying to get back in. Next slide, please, Alex. And here, that's just a hole. It was excavated, dug out by a badger, and then an otter was using that to come and go through that fishery. So it just illustrates you've just got to be keeping a lookout of what's going on and around your fence. Next slide, please. This interesting one, I refer to it as a slough. Whatever, it's just a wet, boggy, slushy area of ground that's absolutely saturated. You'd be halfway up your wellies or to the top of your wellies if you're walking around the edge to the right-hand side of that image. There's no pipe, there's no artificial drainage, and the ditch on the left that's been cut on the inside of the fence, that's purely and simply to capture surface water to feed it into a drain to take it into the water. And we'll go next slide. So the fishery on this side, it's the same, so just taken from the inside, having problems, again, things coming and going. They knew the otter wasn't fenced in, they knew it was coming and going, they're just trying to figure out. And that's all there was. That little pool of water there is no more than 4 inches round, if that. And there was just a single pad mark, about otter pad mark, that is, sorry, about 20 meters to the left, heading there. So I just quickly threw up a camera, just curious, but nothing more than that. And next slide. I apologize for the quality of this. But that otter was down that hole. You could hear it slushing underneath, and then it comes out the other side. So in this case, at least the fishery, they knew now, right, that's one avenue that's being used. We can do something about it and get that sorted out. In the summer months, dry months, that area is as hard as rock. But just when it gets saturated, that's what it goes like, and just gives that opportunity for one to come and go. Next slide, please. And play. Here, people often use, this isn't actually taken from a fence site, I must admit, but just simply showing otters passing through a stone grill. Clearly not narrow enough to keep otters out, but you do often see, you know, something similar to this being used on fisheries. So those vertical bars got to be no more than 2 inches apart between the vertical bars, and with no flex. So you can have them 2 inches, but if they flex, and we've seen that, when they flex, one will squeeze through, potential for one to squeeze through. Next, please, Alex. So here we've got it's an inlet pipe, covered it with netting. I don't particularly like netting over inlets and outlets because it's absolute pain to keep them clear. It is far better with vertical bars or sloping bars like on a stone grill, but like I said, 2 inches, no more than 2 inches between the bars, and with no flex. You can just see under the water level there, there's just some, you know, some damage to the netting. You know, how that came about, you know, who knows, but there's just enough of a room there. When you actually looked at the pipe from the other end, you could see pad marks coming and going on the silt. And next slide. Straight away, the club were on that. Ideally, I'd have loved to have left a camera on it, got the otters coming and going through the mesh. For obvious reasons, the club didn't want to leave it that length of time. So they were in there, vertical bars, and this is literally within a few nights afterwards. You can see a couple of otters there trying this way, that way. There's other clips of them trying to dig in at the sides, going over the tops, this way and that way, just still trying to get into that avenue. But that was hopefully solved. Next slide, please.
What we're going to see is another site, and this actually forms part of a number of video clips taken on a camera covering over several minutes. And so what we're going to see, we can see the otter, it's trying at the top, it's scrabbling away, it's scrabbling at the bars. It then might be working to the left on some of the other video clips we've got. It's working the grill to the right. Other clips, it's diving down, scrabbling underneath, but all the time, it's just keeping going. Next slide, please, Alex. Then on this one, admittedly, this is like a minute later, but genuinely, the sequence of videos takes a few minutes. But here we're going to see the otter finally, after its various attempts, just somehow finds an opening underneath the grill and it's away. But it's interesting to try and highlight, looking down at that grill, if you're trying to look under the water there, you've got the water bubbling away, you've got a little bit of debris. It is really, really difficult at times to actually ensure the integrity of that grill.
So it just emphasizes the need to inspect your inlets and outlets. Again, usually inlets and outlets are my biggest bugbear, and that's usually the point where things are coming and going for obvious reasons. They're following the little brooks of streams, and the inlets getting in and out of places. So next slide, please. So this, quite an intriguing one. I know there's people tonight listening in and watching in, so they will recognise that, shall we say. I'll refer to this as a valve tower, and at the far end, some engineers have been in just doing some maintenance works, repair works at the end of the chamber, and they'd unintentionally left a gap to the left-hand side there that was about 4 to 6 inches. And the Otter, on its nightly wanderings, had suddenly found out when it had gone down the outflow underneath that there was an opening there that could up and back in. And so it was literally zigzagging from the inside of the fishery down through a gate, dropping down there and back out, and underneath itself back out on the outlet street. The site is fenced, but it just shows that they are around nightly or on a weekly basis, however they're moving around their territories, just looking for that first opportunity. Next, Alex. I know that if we can mute this, Alex, if you do play it, please. I know that many people will have seen this video. It's several years old, but it's just illustrating that otters, they can and they do climb. Now, yep, this is down in Slimbridge, but they are quite capable climbers. So next slide. So here, again, just trying to illustrate the climbing ability. These are on seawalls, up in Scotland to, cracking photographs. The one on the left, that seawall there is maybe a couple of meters. The one on the right is one of a sequence of shots, and that'll be several meters. Vertical ladder that otter is using to climb up and down. So all I'm trying to get you thinking about is, have we left anything? I'm not saying a ladder, but have you left something adjacent to your fence line that could be utilized by an otter to climb up and drop in? Next slide, please. And a lot of you will have seen this one. I fully accept it's taken outside of the UK, but it's just simply illustrating an otter climbing up a ladder and just showing how, the ingenuity that they have got. And this one works its way up. And then later on in the clip, it actually shows it coming back, climbing down, and then dropping into the pool. And a lot of people have already seen that. Next slide, Alex. This one, again, I admit it's a captive otter. I don't know how this otter, got up, let's say, to that tree. But let's just imagine that it got up the same way, or roughly the same way as you'll watch it coming down. So imagine something like that, possibly at the side of your fence, and then it being able to use like that. I think this is absolutely amazing footage just to illustrate what can. Possibly more extreme in a captive situation than in the wild, but you can see how the trunk is marked and worn there. So it has been used in that avenue a few times. So it's going to be an extreme circumstance where that opportunity may arise. But if you've got a leaning tree, as we've mentioned before on the previous video, or fallen timber that an otter could use to get in, that might be using it, how it's getting into your fishery. Next slide, please. So the reason I've shown those previous ones was to then illustrate a fishery in this country. And here we had a case, the owners had no idea how this thing was coming and going. There was a little bit of sign on one of the corners, popped a camera on, and several nights we were capturing that otter going up and down there. That's a fence 1.65, 1.7 high with a short overhang on the top. As soon as the owners who were checking the cameras for me saw that, they quickly rectified that corner, only for a night or so later. Next slide, please, Alex. No, next one. It then moved down and did exactly the same thing on one of the next corners. That's about 150 meters, let's say, to the side of the previous one. So this otter had just figured it out. If it climbed up, it could squeeze through the overhang at the top and drop in to the fishery. But as soon as the landowners, they knew how the otter or otters were coming and going onto that site, they could then rectify the problem. Just some maintenance works on the fence, hopefully has resolved, well, did resolve that problem. Next slide. So all I'm asking, you've just watched some otters climbing trees, climbing up a seawall, climbing up a ladder, climbing up a fence and jumping in. So it's not beyond the realms to think of them climbing through. The image on the left, can they up and through that hole there on the gate catch, so therefore plate it off? Could they climb up the side of the gate, whether it's the hanging or the clashing side, and squeeze through? You have to go, unfortunately, at times to the nth degree to stop every which way avenue that's possible for those. So that's essentially, that's what this is about tonight, is me trying to emphasize the need to rigorously and regularly check your fences and get them signed off. Don't just leave it to the same person walking round and round and round, because that person they'll just get fed up with doing it. Change it, get on a bit of a rota, different people and a different set of eyes each time. And final slide, please. So compared to the last video that I did, I'm going to call a close to it now. Far shorter than the last one, so it's probably a sigh of relief from a number of people across the country who've been listening in. There's my contact details and those of Jake. I'd like to thank you for listening. And yeah, if you're having problems, genuinely, I'm talking now, but we do go to some places and it's very sensitive. They don't want it to be known that they've got otters coming and going. You know, we are here to help you guys. So by all means, get in touch. Thank you.